WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us. We Should Know is on there. We're coming to you from Star Communications, Channel 16, WCLN Radio for the audible piece. Also, there's a summation in the Sampson Weekly newspaper. Not quite all the content, but a good rendering of the information we talk about. Today, I want to thank you particularly for being with us. We're talking something that's really going to affect, may already have affected you, but the whole idea of summertime issues, accidents, problems, things that typically gravitate not necessarily just to summer and hotter months of the year, but particularly sometimes escalate. And we're talking with two folks that are in the middle of that. They're the people that show up when you can't handle the problem, and it's the first person here is the Fire Chief, City of Clinton, Stephen Lovette. Chief, thank you for being with us.
Yes, sir.
And the Assistant Police Chief, Anthony Davis, is with us. Now, guys, somebody would probably, first thing they're going to be thinking is, well, wait a minute, how does this work? But typically, if it's a call, and say, for example, if it's related to a drowning issue, both the police department, the fire department, and the police department, both is going to end up on that scene.
We work very, very seamlessly, hand in hand with each other. I'm very fortunate that our law enforcement counterparts, that we have the opportunity to work really well together.
And Anthony, one of the things that strikes me with the police department, there's always an investigation involved. And we've seen these horrific kinds of deaths with small children and drownings. They are so heart-rending. What do you say to parents? I mean, folks just need to kind of put themselves in the position you guys are in. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, sometimes it's the stuff that's unsaid that's the most important. They just want to see that something's being done when the first responders get there. So regardless of what kind of death it may be, it's going to be treated as an investigation until proven otherwise.
Those type things, Chief, as we look at that and think of it from just the average person side of the house, is there some things that you could say to folks to remember, whether it's life jackets, whether it's observation in a pool as kids are swimming, how many people need to be looking, and those kinds of things? I'm often struck with the fact that parents may be right there.
Very much so, and we can address the recreational aspect. But with pools, know where your children are at. Know where know which end of the pool your kids are on. You know, don't allow your children to go into the deep end, truly, if they can't swim. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason the rope buoys are across the pool. And it goes back to maintaining situational awareness. Mm-hmm. Where are your children? Always look. Most of my guys have kids. Mm-hmm. I have a child. And we take that very seriously when it comes to that and maintaining that child's safety. Know where your children are at, especially in a pool. You go to the lake, you go to the ocean. Is it a little harder to keep up with them? Sure it is. Find something that will give them a distinguishing feature, whether it's a bandana of a bright color, a t-shirt of a bright color, a hat of a bright color. You know, maintaining that you have good situational awareness of where your children are at.
You know, Anthony, I look at it sometimes and I wonder how people get beyond that. And there's probably some people listening today that maybe has lost children. This is a frequency of activities that occur. But during a pool situation like that, folks need to be, as the Chief just pointed out, alert. But sometimes people find that as a wonderful time to have their favorite libation and beverage. And all of a sudden, you know, things get into conversation, and you know, you might not have heard the child for the past 2 or 3 minutes. And the truth is, they can't make a noise if they're drowning, can they?
That's right. And I think, like Chief said, the situational awareness is when you go to a pool, there may be a lifeguard on duty, and you want to shift that responsibility to the lifeguards. That responsibility shouldn't be shifted. They're just there for added protection. So the situational awareness of where your children are should remain your responsibility.
Is the number of kinds of pools a concern for you guys too? Because, you know, we've seen these inflatable things, and then folks will say, well, there was not but 3 foot of water, but I'm reminded sometimes you can drown in a bathtub if you're not aware of what's going on.
Exactly, and that's where we go back to it, from the bathtub to the blow-up pool in the backyard to the standing pool in the backyard to the commercial pool to the hotel motel pool where you may be staying on vacation. It goes back to that awareness and maintaining that young children don't have the capacity yet to make that good quality decision. I believe wholeheartedly that the child needs to understand that we're doing things for their safety. And if you take just 10 minutes and explain to your child before you go out into the pool, this is where your area of play is okay. You need to be right here where I can see you, where I can maintain an eye contact with you, where you hear me and I hear you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think when I think about that, I think about the idea of swimming lessons being important. I see more and more parents today taking their 4 or 5-year-old children, even younger, to the pool to learn how to swim, but it doesn't negate the responsibility they have to be sure they're watching that child. But Anthony, it's hard for you to go to a scene when something like that's happening and look at the parent and go, well, you just can't do that.
You just can't. Mm-hmm. They got to have that full responsibility where that child is at all times. And you go back to, he was talking about the different size pools. You know, I've seen different instances, even in bathtubs, even shifting that responsibility. You know, a split second, just a split second event can change your life in any given time. We
live in a rural area here in this part of the state, in particular east of 95. Everything's pretty much rural, whether you're in town or whether you're in the country. It's all got that configuration of ponds and streams and rivers and that kind of thing. And there's this tendency, you know, you might see a movie, you might think, well, I can just dive right off of this bridge into that water. What's the real problem with that?
Not being able to see below the surface of the water, and not being from Eastern North Carolina, but I grew up in the Piedmont area and grew up in an agriculturally based community. We all had stock ponds, and that was where we would go after baling hay and jump in the pond and cool off for the afternoon, but not being able to see under that surface of the water. You don't always know what's there, and diving in head first to an unknown body of water is just an accident waiting to happen.
Especially in some of the ponds and the rivers, particularly because depth becomes an issue as well. If you're jumping from 8-10 feet high and the water's not but what, 3 or 4 feet deep, and you can't tell the difference.
Exactly. You cannot determine the depth of the water merely by looking at the surface.
So we're looking not only now when we're thinking about bodies of water, we're thinking in terms of not only just the potential of drowning, but we're thinking of body issues. So what are some of the kinds of things that you've seen where people do these things? I mean, did they end up with broken arms or what?
Well, there have been everything from minor injuries. In my career, I've responded to minor injuries to that of a death. From separated shoulders to lacerations to people having lacerations and abrasions on their head to spinal injuries, and ended up as a paralyzed individual and then death. So those are the things that we need to remember, and not only the aspect of now that it's vacation time, but we have just started the hurricane season.
Oh, absolutely.
The hurricane season.
Exactly, and summer is officially here, so we're locked into that. One of the things that strikes me with that said, Anthony, is this becomes a legal issue too, because I recall recently, and I think I could cite the article, a young lady decided to push another young lady off of a bridge in fun and play. Good friends, there was no anger or malice involved, but in that play, as I recall, there was a court case ended up involving that. Yeah,
there were some legal ramifications for that, some negligence on their part, because the female did get hurt when she was pushed off. And you can also have some civil liabilities come along with that.
So a person could find themselves not only injuring a close friend and have to deal with the impact of that, but also end up in a courtroom.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think when you investigate those kinds of things, it's not that you go in there looking for malice, but at the same time, you have to look at that as part of the picture.
We do, and as an investigation on the law enforcement side of it, we're fact finders. We live on facts. So when we do an investigation, it's going to be strictly on the facts of the investigation.
How could we message, and I'm sure I know both of you very well, and you're constantly out in the public, you're constantly talking to people. There's one thing about it, is anybody connected with the community in the city of Clinton, it's the police department, the fire department. So you guys are out there. What are you hearing from the public? Is there something that we're not doing? When I say we collectively, folks like me that talk to people on the radio, TV, but is there something we can do better to get the message out?
Emphasize responsibility with children. Emphasize responsibility that, just as Assistant Chief Davis stated, you take your child to the pool, that lifeguard is there, but that does not negate you from the responsibility of maintaining awareness of where your child's at. During the hurricane season, as I mentioned, this is now hurricane season. The last hurricane, last September, my department responded to a number of still water, static water, and swift water rescue calls. Mm-hmm. When you see water over the edge of the roadway, not just from a rain, and people need to utilize that aspect of common sense. Where you see water moving over the roadway, don't try to go through it. Stop, back up, turn around. And it goes back to that aspect of the utilization of common sense.
Anthony, one of the things I think about, and I've seen these, and everybody watching and listening today has too, you flip your TV on and you see somebody, and there's somebody there in today's world with a camera on their phone, and they get the picture, and somebody all of a sudden decides, and you can see the car hesitate, and all of a sudden they decide, I'm going through it. Is that a big issue, people just making instantaneous wrong decisions?
It is. Life's going to happen. People make bad mistakes. Everybody's one mistake away from the defendant's table. That's why we implemented the camera program. We have the camera systems in the cars and on the bodies of our officers. We just want that transparency with the public. I say if they want to record us, let them go ahead. It's fine. We'll have cameras too, and if they have any issues, they can always call.
And you get back to that piece of it, that it's got to be factual.
Right.
If we're going to digest it and we got to swallow the bad situation that occurred, factual makes it go down a little bit easier,
That's
I
right.
guess, because we don't need a lot of the hype. We're going to talk a bit more about this when we come back, but as we go to break, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to ask you to call a friend. Stay tuned. We're talking about some of the issues that may save you from serious injury or a friend, or save your life if you listen. Two folks deal with this each and every day. We'll be right back.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on there. Again, we're coming to you from Channel 16 Star Communications, WCLN Radio. We're talking about a subject today that has the potential, or it might already have, touched your life, and that's accidents. Things that happen sometimes during the summertime, but particularly in the hotter months of the year, we see all kinds of things. We've been talking about things that happen around waterways, pools, those kinds of things, gentlemen. Our guests today are familiar with this, broad range of experience. Chief Lovette, you come to Clinton with bearing a huge bag of information and background as you come to Clinton. And Anthony Davis is Assistant Police Chief here. You've looked through this window of law enforcement and accidents and tragedies quite some time now, and it gets personal, because in a small town you tend to know everybody knows you, you want to fix things. Let's talk about the summertime though, and kind of maybe segue a little bit away from some of the water issues, and we can go back to that if we need to. But the other thing that strikes me is heat involves other kinds of things that affects people. I don't know whether it's just the weather or, again, the beverage they may be using at the time, but it causes them to want to do strange things. And you find people with heat strokes, heart attacks, and, it might be your average jogger or biker, and he says, well, I believe I can ride 25 miles today. And then everything goes fuzzy. Mm-hmm. So talk to us about what you've seen with that.
Be very aware of the conditions outside. When you stop sweating, you're already to the point of a medical emergency. Hydration is so important. In my previous employer, that was one thing that was really, really stressed to the on-shift crews, of hydration and making sure we were hydrated. I have brought that thought process to Clinton, sharing it not only with my folks at the fire department, but with the police department and with our public works guys. They're out working in the heat. Work for small periods of time, take frequent breaks, make sure you get something inside of you Be mindful of what your body is telling you. If your chest is hurting, sit down, get assistance if needed. I have never heard in my 30-plus year career of a firefighter, law enforcement officer, medic, that if someone truly needs help and they call 911, we're there to help regardless. And we're not there to chastise or criticize what were you doing. It's that fact-finding information. Make sure you hydrate. Drink lots of fluids. There are a number of commercial drinks on the market to keep your body hydrated. Mm-hmm. I personally, and I've brought the thought process to my folks in Clinton, I drink a half a bottle of Pedialyte every day. What does Pedialyte do to children? Keeps them from being dehydrated.
And increases those electrolytes in the body.
Exactly. My body metabolism is I perspire a great deal. Mm-hmm. That keeps it in check. I was burning the other night with a recruit academy, making sure that everybody hydrates. When you go through a bottle, you're drinking a bottle of water. We had a call for service the other morning. When my guys would come out and change the air bottle on their back, they're getting a 16-ounce bottle of water. I make sure my guys are hydrated. Just because it's coming out, you need to replenish it. One
of the things that's often asked, and I hear people in discussions talk about this, particularly as it relates to fire, Anthony, but Chief, when you have a summertime fire, mm-hmm. the temperature outside is 90 plus, mm-hmm. the humidity is 98. You guys put on what appears to us as very heavy gear.
It is.
And you're fighting a flame sometimes from inside mm-hmm. that may be upwards of 100 plus. How does that work?
Ceiling temperatures in your average residential house fire, what we have inside of our homes today, what do we have that's not made of plastic?
That's right.
Very little. Plastic will distribute, and this is how we look and we gauge fire, through the BTUs that are put off. So we look at all of these things. We know it's hot inside. That's the reason our protective equipment is so heavy. It protects us from those temperatures. Ceiling temperatures in your average residential house fire can reach anywhere from 600 to 800 to 1,000 degrees.
Wow.
And we are in that environment. So we make sure we have good personal protective equipment. We maintain our equipment. We make sure we've got good air packs. And we use things like ventilation to our benefit. We're not just taking out all the windows for taking out all the windows, we're taking them out systematically. And for the equipment that we wear, it is important that my guys and firefighters and volunteers and career guys, there's no differentiation in the job we do. Drink something every day. Drink that bottle of water. Keep a glass of ice water with you all the time, especially in our profession. Law enforcement's the same way. You think about the vest they wear inside the car. Well, the car's air conditioned, but that vest still retains body heat. Mm-hmm. What does that do to your core temperature? It just drives it up.
Well, and with law enforcement, Anthony, one of the things that also strikes me is that oftentimes you have an unfortunate accident, you have maybe a death involved with that. You may be on pavement and asphalt for 6 or 8 hours, depending on the level of that accident. Do you have a protocol in place, and you say, well, we're going to swap you out every few minutes or so, or every hour? How does that work?
Yeah, there's some different things we do. We do have policies in place that you can remove the vest depending on what temperature it is. But as in today's climate, we probably won't want to do that. We also have, like you said, switching out every hour or two, leaving it to the supervisor, making sure those guys are hydrated, getting off that hot pavement, because I've been out there where it can melt the bottom of your shoes on the pavement. It's so hot.
How do we address to the general population heat-related, and I'll call them accidents, but it's just, again, people forget to drink water, they forget to intake water, they forget to take a break maybe, or they sometimes, maybe given their age, they think they can do more than they can. How do you get folks to understand that this is something that you've responded to before and you might see it again, but folks tend to not think about that, and summertime that could be completely different than it is in wintertime? Well,
wintertime shows its own different challenges and difficulties, but we all have the mindset of, it won't happen to me.
Yeah.
It won't happen to me. It can happen to you. That's the reason we have to take the precautions, making sure we're hydrating daily. If you're working outside in the yard, make sure that you're taking often breaks, getting to the shade, working with a hat. Some of us that are follically challenged, we work with a hat all the time.
I'm going to use that phrase. I like that.
You like that?
Follically challenged.
But it just goes back to the aspect of having good common sense, taking advantage of it, getting up early in the morning if you can afford it, to get up to do what you need to do outside before it gets so hot. Mm-hmm. The heat of the day, we see our temperature spikes anywhere from noon to 4 p.m. So trying to avoid those times. Can we always do it? No, we can't. Think about the guys that are out, that may be working outside. Take those breaks. That is so important.
And I think the other part of that is I want to kind of get you in this, because I know you got to leave after the first segment here, or actually halftime. You're going to be leaving, but so I'm going to try to get this in before you do leave. Is this idea that when we look at summertime, when we look at activities, that's important, but there's other issues that typically you find during the summertime, which includes animals of various types that people are exposed to, that are in hyper alert situation. And I'll throw that out as everything from snake bites to your best friend, a dog might bite you. What do you face with that? What do you see with that?
The heat will affect us all, animals as well as humans. The heat affects us all. Know your environment. If you're going camping in the woods, know that we have a number of species of snakes throughout our locality. Some of them are very venomous snakes, the copperheads, the cottonmouth moccasins. Know what we have available. Know if you find it, leave it alone. Know the traditional markings of our venomous snakes. Know that my neighbor's dog is not enjoying the heat being outside. He may not have the temperament to handle a typical play. So understanding that the heat will affect us all. If you're camping, know your environment. That's the biggest thing. Now that we've started the hurricane season, I go back to that. Water that pushes up out of a flooded area is going to draw that wildlife. What can it push out of our rivers and creeks? So those are the things of realizing that just because you're out walking in the woods, know where you're going, know where you see where you put your feet, realize what you're stepping down on. Just keeping that good situational awareness.
One of the things I've often heard is that given a snake bite situation, it's important to be able to identify not only that snake, but somebody said, well, if you can kill the snake, bring the snake with you so somebody will know what it is, because does that add to understanding how they treat you or what?
I don't know many paramedics that are going to allow a snake in the back of their
ambulance.
I wouldn't
think so.
I'm not going to allow one on my fire truck. What about you?
No.
In your car?
No.
I think that would be a good one to clarify right now. We don't necessarily need to hold a snake.
Nope.
No.
And I know there are, having run snake bite calls in my career, you walk in with a snake into an ER, a doctor will not think it's funny.
No, and I think that's a myth sometimes that gets out there. But going forward, if you can kind of give them a description of that, or even if you can take a picture with your phone,
exactly,
take it with you and say, look, I'm not sure what it is, but can you help me identify it? Because they don't really know how to treat unless they know what they're dealing with.
Exactly.
If they don't, then it's just what did they do? Look for the swelling and see how bad.
The patient will present signs and symptoms of particular snake bites, depending upon the species. But that's just it. Just the old analogy of kill the snake and bring it with you. I'm not sure of many paramedics that are going to allow that snake to ride with them to the ambulance.
I don't know of any that I'm aware. I certainly wouldn't. But you've heard that as I have. People would say, and so we need to debunk that myth, I guess, from the beginning as we go along.
Exactly. If you want to bring the snake, I would consider contacting animal control and allow the professional animal control officer to do that very thing.
Yeah.
We all carry cell phones with us. Everybody's got a cell phone. Some folks have two. So either get a picture of it, call animal control. If you're out in the woods, just know where you're at. Most phones now have the GPS capabilities. Know where you're at. It's good situational awareness.
Well, Chief, I want to thank you for being with us, and as the fire chief here in the city of Clinton. I know everybody's proud that we've got the caliber of people that we've got working here. And unfortunately, you got a schedule. So when we come back from the second half, I'll talk with the assistant police chief, and we'll talk about a lot of stuff, including traffic in the city of Clinton. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. Please stay tuned. Call a friend, and we're talking about safety issues, everything that you may face during the summertime. We'll be back in a moment.
You come out to replace a bad sensor, and that adds a 5-year commitment to my contract, and you don't tell me? Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping homes secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody trying to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank you for being with us today. Again, we're talking a lot about summertime issues that you may confront that for some reason involves emergency responders. We just had the fire chief with the city of Clinton with us. He had to depart. Chief Lovette, very busy fellow here in the city of Clinton. Assistant Police Chief Anthony Davis has been with us and is going to remain on the second half of the show. And we're going to talk a bit about some of the kinds of, and I guess I'm intentionally maybe not using the word law enforcement issues, but I'll call it peacekeeping issues. The expectation, Anthony, and you've been in this work for quite some time, the expectation for law enforcement not only seems to have changed radically over the years, but continues to evolve. And part of it is cameras. Part of it is the police department becoming closer and more involved in the communities and understanding the communities. What do you see happening oftentimes during the summertime as folks, I'll use the analogy of throwing the door open there on the porch and having a good time and, well, let's all get together and walk downtown and we'll take our beverage with us. All of those kinds of things. Let's talk about what you're seeing through your eyes, through the people that work for you, through their eyes. What do we need to get the public to understand?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to understand is that the laws don't change. The culture may change, but the laws don't change. We're still going to do professional policing. You know, we expect the officers to do professional policing regardless of what situation they're in. But they are going to react to whatever situation they're given. So if they're given a hostile situation, you're going to get a different reaction than if you would if you're on a traffic stop or if you responded to a domestic violence call. There's different protocols in place to deal with each one of those situations. So whatever they're presented with is the way they're going to react and respond to that situation.
When we hear that, one of the things that comes to my mind is this idea of escalation of force. So, and I mean, I'm sure folks have seen all kinds of things on camera phones, YouTube, other things, but typically this escalation of force can be gradual or it can be instantaneous. So the point is, I think from the law enforcement perspective, are you guys prepared to meet measure for measure wherever that goes? And I think that's the thing that the general population don't understand is that, as you just pointed out, you've got to deal with a specific set of laws that's in place. The people that may be, they think they're having a good time may not be thinking about what the law or the protocol. There's no protocols involved in a situation that's gone to fisticuffs, has it?
Right, that's right. And I think when they see the tools such as the taser, the aspeton, the OC spray, all they see is the tool. But like you said, they don't see the laws that govern those tools, when you can use them, when you can't use them.
So what is the challenge now today with law enforcement, given the fact that you've got, quote, the rule of law, but yet at the same time you have the social judgment that is placed on you and your department and your personnel by the use of instantaneous communication on Facebook and other social media formats? It's really a slippery slope, is it not?
It is. I think overcoming the perception is the biggest for us. It is, like you said, that video will come out and be posted on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, and all they see is maybe a 15-second clip of a 3-minute incident that happened, such as Walmart. You know, they see the very first part or the very end of it and don't see the totality of what happened in that situation.
Nor do they see the beginning of it, the escalation of it, or who was involved. And all of a sudden, your officers are thrown in the middle of that fray, and then it becomes, as you just pointed out, kind of a media event because it's passed around everywhere. How do you educate the public beyond just the obvious, which is let's don't be doing this anymore?
Right.
How do you educate the public that there's going to be immediate, and for them, unfortunately, or for somebody in that situation, a negative result?
I think it goes back to, like you said earlier in your intro, is the community projects and stuff. You know, how involved are you in the community you serve? You know, if you look at several instances across the nation that were involved with different shootings where they had protests and stuff, you know, I question how involved was the department in that community? Mm-hmm. You know, the community leaders, you know, what kind of relationship did you have with those? Did you meet with them? So having a good, strong relationship with community leaders in your community, you know, overcome that perception. And that's why we implemented the body camera program. Having that footage, you know, it's an officer safety issue. I can pull it up right on my computer, look at it, you know, no questions asked. I get to see the whole thing. So instead of that 10, 15-second clip on YouTube or Facebook, you know, I get to see the totality.
Yeah, and all the camera, and I'm glad you brought that up now because all the officers in Clinton have been for some time use cameras not only in their cars but on their person, correct?
That's correct.
So you do find folks oftentimes will ask, well, wonder if all the departments are required to do that. That's individually based per department, is it not? To make that decision.
It is based on their department head and what direction they're wanting to go, their need. We implemented ours. I'll say we've had ours implemented now for going on 7 years probably.
And I think what you pointed out, I want to follow up on too, just so folks will really understand this, is from what I heard you just say, it's an advantage to you as assistant police chief and a management team to have that because you can debunk some myths that may have occurred as a result of social media, as a result of maybe somebody deciding they want to change things and put it out to look a different way. You've got the actual footage from the camera on that person.
It is stored right on a server. It's encrypted. There are laws that the governor now where we can release it or can't release it, but the video footage is there, you know, unchanged, and if we need it, we can watch it.
And I think that's the point too. A lot of times folks say, well, why don't we just take that footage the police department's got and just put it on TV for where everybody can see it? There's laws governing that. You can't do that.
That's correct. There's a North Carolina law that governs the release of video footage from departments.
Do you find that, and you've been in the business a long time, that as you go through summer after summer, are there things that you kind of look for that you started kind of anticipating, well, this is likely going to happen and we need to be aware of this kind of thing happening? Is there kind of patterns that you can talk about?
Absolutely, and something we've started doing in Clinton over the past several years is we do data policing, data-driven policing. So we actually use data that we collect on a daily basis to direct what we do on our patrols, speed enforcement, drug areas. So if you see somebody running radar on Sunset Avenue, it's not because they just want to run radar. It's because we got an issue there or anywhere else in town.
Right.
But for summertime, I like to call it crime of opportunity because you got more people walking around, it's hot. So, you know, do you leave your doors unlocked on your vehicle? Your garage doors up? Do you leave your windows open at home when you leave? Those crimes of opportunity where people may not normally commit those crimes, but when they're walking by and they shake your door handle and it's open, they may go in your car and steal something. So making sure we lock that stuff up and not leaving those opportunities out there.
So the idea behind that is if you don't leave that particular item where it's just easily accessible, then there's a good possibility that that particular criminal event may not occur.
That's correct. You know, like iPads, cell phones, not laid out in the open. If you're stopping at Walmart, be sure you're putting that stuff in your console, hiding it up under your seat. You know, just leaving it out of view where people can't see it.
A question I'm often asked, and I think you can help take care of this. When should law enforcement be called? When should somebody call and say, look, I'm just suspicious something's going on? Is there ever a call that you would say to somebody, well, don't call us about that? Or do you want to hear from the public, even if it's a feeling that something just looks a little bit strange? You know, I mean, something that's, I mean, obviously, if you're putting your children in the trunk of the car and closing the trunk, it's a problem, you know. But if it's something that just is a suspicion somebody has, should they pick up the phone and say, you know, I thought maybe the police department ought to look at this
That's probably the biggest question I get asked is, do I need to call the non-emergency number? Do I need to call 911?
Right.
When do I need to call them? Something we like to do is, I don't care what kind of issue it is. If it's a quality of life issue here in Clinton, I can't speak for every department, outside of Clinton, but for the city of Clinton, if it's a quality of life issue, dealing with a nuisance, it could be dealing with trash, anything, call us. If we can't deal with it, we'll get you to the right department that can deal with it.
And back to your point, if they call the 592-3105 number, they'll get an answer if it's in regular business hours.
Right.
But if not, that's then flipped over to Emergency Operations Center, where you get a dispatcher that's going to follow up with a protocol question.
Yes, sir.
But you would say to people, don't hesitate.
Don't hesitate.
Whatever it may be.
That's what we're here for.
Whether it's if you see people walking from one car to the other at Lowe's looking in the cars, it might be a good idea to call, say, well, this person not putting anything on the windshield, and they're obviously looking for something, and I just thought it a little bit strange.
Yeah, if nothing else, we'll go out and ID them, If nothing happens, it's fine, but we have their information in case something does come up later.
Are you pleased with response time for an average non-emergency call? I mean, do you think when you look at the data that Clinton is either equal to or the same framework of getting there to the call?
Oh yeah, that's something we look at every month, and our response time is good. Real proud of our officers, the way they respond. And they do have different sectors they work to make sure that I don't have 3 officers on the west side of town. So if I have a call on the south side, I need somebody on the south side. So they do have different areas they work in the city. Even though we're a small city, they do have different sectors they work, so we can do that, make sure we got a good response time.
And a lot of times when they get there, if a person's reporting something, they probably need to kind of either make some notes or have something available so they know what they're trying to tell them. A lot of times it's the license plate number or some description.
Right. Depending on what type of call it is, you want to make sure you got all that descriptive information. Hat, shirt, what are they wearing, colors, vehicle information, registration numbers. You want to try to have all that information for them to get there.
Number of people involved in whatever situation it may have been.
If they've left, the faster they can get that information out, the faster we might be able to find out who it was.
Well, and the other piece of that is also a lot of times folks don't want to get caught up in the adjudication process. They want to be left out of that, but yet they want somebody to know what's going on.
That's why we had the tip line.
Well, we're going to take a break, and ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We're talking with the Assistant Chief of the Clinton Police Department, Anthony Davis. We're talking about issues that may confront you that they need assistance. These folks will be back in a moment.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you very much for being with us today. As you've noticed, if you've been with us from the beginning, we had the fire chief with the City of Clinton, Chief Stephen Lovette, with us for the first segment, first half actually, and also Lieutenant Anthony Davis. He's the Assistant Police Chief here in the City of Clinton, has been with us and remains with us for this last couple of segments here. And we're talking a lot about law enforcement stuff. Anthony, the Clinton Police Department is not only nationally accredited, but recently was really recognized for a campaign you guys put together. I think it was called a One Mind campaign. Tell us about that campaign and why you feel like that was kind of an innovative way of dealing with law enforcement today.
This actually come about by Chief Edwards. He was looking at a way to get involved with crisis intervention at the opioid epidemic. So we reached out. They had a One Mind campaign. It consisted of several different modules. Your department had to be a percentage CIT certified, which is crisis intervention training. It's a 40-hour block of instruction you go through. Our first aid for crisis intervention is an in-service class. And it all goes on percentages of your department that are qualified and certified in these areas. We finished the One Mind campaign, and we were the first in North Carolina, first department in North Carolina to be accredited with that campaign.
And that's huge, particularly if you just look at the one piece of it, the crisis intervention, because that allows you not only to be able to deal with, but understand folks that are having a mental health emergency, and it could be anything from substance abuse to PTSD or whatever may be going on. That's almost something now that is becoming expected of law enforcement agencies, is it not?
It is, not only for police, but also just public safety in general. Any first responder, because it could be just a trigger word that you say to that person when you get with them that just sends them off the deep end, and the situation's escalated, and now you're having to deal with a whole other set of issues that you wouldn't have to have if you'd been trained in crisis intervention and know how to speak to someone with a mental illness.
And this fits in the concept too. Clinton PD, like a number of agencies in North Carolina, is now on a national accreditation standard in which you guys not only meet the state guidelines as it relates to minimum standards, but you also now put yourself in a situation you said, hey, we want to take on the challenge nationally to be able to say we meet all the standards on a national accreditation level. How huge is that, and is that kind of a heavy weight to carry?
It is huge, and it is an undertaking. It's a lot of work because you're trying to mirror your policies and procedures by the best national practices across the nation for policing. And then the 21st policing come around with the body cameras, the community events, and you're getting involved back in the community. All that's incorporated in your accreditation. We're currently on our 3rd year of our 4-year cycle. 2020 will be our renewal. We're our full on-site. They come on next year. We're looking forward to it. I think we're going to be fine. We're ticking along.
And I think just so folks will know, and just kind of, you don't have to get into too much detail here, but just a big picture of this, you're actually accredited by outside people that look in and say, okay, show us what you've done here, or let's see what you're doing here. And then that data is put in and compared nationally to see if you're on that level of actually receiving that accreditation.
Yeah, they changed it up a little bit. Now we have what they call a CSM. It's a person that we give them access to our computer system. And they look at our standards every year, and they do a review, and then they send us back a report and let us know what we need to change, what we could do better. Then at the end of the 4-year cycle, they have a full on-site where they look at everything. But we have changed our policy procedures, and we're moving along with the best practices, and look forward to 2020.
And too, Anthony, I think one of the things that strikes me is folks will probably understand this, because the city of Clinton, although it's small in numbers as you compare it with, but it's typical of a lot of small towns, but this particular area has a lot of flow-through traffic with US 701, Highway 24, hopefully that'll be taken care of soon. But you have a lot of flow-through traffic, so you have people expecting the same kind of service they get from law enforcement they do in Charlotte, Greensboro, wherever it may be. You gotta equal that standard. We
do, especially with traffic.
Yeah.
It is a nightmare right now with 24, but we're working through it. Just an example is College Street. We've done a study on a 3-day given period. 20,000 vehicles go through there.
Wow.
You wouldn't realize it, but that's how much traffic you have on that street. And that's just one of our inner city streets. So you're looking at 701, 24, the major streets. You're looking at a lot of heavy traffic.
Been a lot of stuff since you mentioned 24. I'm not really going to go there, but I will. Since you mentioned 24, been a lot of discussion on that. Mayor Starling has had his commentary in the paper, and other folks have made commentary. It just seems like there's a lot of extended anxiety. What do you say to folks on what they should expect until this thing is completed, what they should suspect and prepare themselves for when they hit that moment of, folks around here are just not used to waiting in traffic over about 2 or 3 minutes, and they really get frustrated.
I think the biggest thing to understand is it is not a city street. It is owned by the state. It is a state project. I have a lot of complaints complaining about the road for the city and the department. It's not ours. It is an NCDOT project. If your car gets damaged or something like that, it needs to be reverted over to NCDOT. We get a lot of those calls. But the foreseeable future, I would say congestion. They do have a lot more paving to do over the section there in front of Walmart to the bridge. They are working again this morning under the bridge, paving, so heavy congestion today. But for the foreseeable future, I don't see it any getting better. As far
and
as
it's like
congestion.
everybody wants to get to that side of town simply because there's a heavy number of stores there, particularly Walmart and Lowe's and others. But there's also, I would remind folks, and I think it would be prudent to say, look, we do have grocery stores on North Boulevard and Northeast Boulevard with that's accessible. So, you might want to use that, especially if you're in a hurry.
That's right.
And we're all in a hurry.
We're all in a hurry. Sometimes we just got to slow down.
Let's talk a little bit more in depth, because this is something also that's brought to my attention. Well, when I come out from the post office and I can't turn left and all this, but the signage, from what I can understand, has taken that into account, and it's asking people to actually turn and go behind Lowe's, and there's a street there that can bring you right back into 24. Do you think that's something that needs to be messaged a little stronger?
Yeah, we've tried to get the message out several times. If they called us, what we're going to tell them, that Pierce Street, it's called the Pierce Street Extension. And that's why it was put there, was to give them out from the Lowe's Shopping Center. So you turn out on Westover Road, turn right on that Pierce Street Extension, and come out at the light on 24. Then you have a traffic light to let you out on traffic.
Not necessarily getting away from that, but I want to touch on some traffic issues that often comes up, and one of those is motorbikes, golf carts, ATVs in the city of Clinton, and well, I'll just keep it here because I'm going to push all of it on you. But a lot of times folks will decide, well, I believe I'm just going down to see my neighbor on my four-wheeler, and they live, it's just 2 blocks over. It can't hurt anything. I'm just going to shoot over there and come back. Legal, illegal, what's the standard? And I know, officer discretion is heavily pushed by your department, which I think is a good idea. What do you tell folks? Is that something that they need to just kind of keep a handle on because it can get out of control? And how is that treated from a law enforcement perspective?
What I push down to the officers is be fair and consistent in your discretion. Discretion is good, but be fair and consistent in the way you handle your discretion. The only legal way to ride any of the motorcycles, bicycles, go-karts,
mopeds,
whatever you want to ride, is to have a North Carolina registration plate on it. It has to be registered through.
If it's on a street, a public street.
If it's on a street or highway, it has to be registered with a North Carolina license plate on it and insurance.
And I think that's the kind of thing I see a lot, because a lot of times folks at the beach just have access to go over where they want to and that kind of thing, and then they come back home. Well, I just brought my card home to get it serviced or what have you, and so, oh shoot, I'm going to run over to so and so, and they find themselves, well, I'm in trouble here. We've got housing developments too in the city of Clinton, and I look at Fox Lake, Cahary, and other places. Same applies there, or is there a different standard depending on whether it's Timberlake, Fox Lake?
Same applies. It is a street. It's a public street or highway. It still applies. Now, if it's a gated community, it could be different. But if it is a street or highway, it's going to have to be registered with North Carolina registration plate on it.
And if folks have a question, they can always pick up the phone in 592-3105. They can call and get a specific answer if it relates to a criminal justice or law enforcement issue.
Absolutely. And in these cases, the officer sees the golf cart. We've had this stuff in the past. They're just going to give them a little warning, send them on their way, educate them. Now, if they get caught again, they may get a ticket.
Yeah.
But the first time, they're going to educate them, give them a warning. Send them on their way.
So there is some margin there, should we say, of error. The kind of the last thing I want to touch on very quickly, one of the things I hear people say a lot, and I know you do too, it's summertime and the children are out of school, they want, and I'm going to use this phrase, they want something to do. And you hear that a lot. What do you say to folks like that? I asked the same questions at Recreation Department folks last week, and of course they got a long laundry list, but everybody's not going to go to the Recreation Department.
That's right. You got to find something to get them involved in. We do a police camp with the police department, something we started a couple years ago. We also do some sports stuff out at the park, kickball. We're going to get some of that stuff going this summer. Just bring them out, get them involved in some sports. That way they're involved with us and not involved walking the streets. And
they can kind of know where folks are and that kind of thing, which moves the department a huge step ahead in being involved not only in the community but involved in the lives of the community.
That's right.
Well, this has been a kind of a conversation I wanted to have for some time, and I've got several other things I want to cover, but due to today's situation where we've had both you guys in, maybe I can get you and maybe this chief come back sometime. We'll talk a little bit more about local policing and the impact of that.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank our guests today. I want to thank you for being with us today and remind you that I look forward to seeing you each and every week right here on We Should Know. And by that being said, I will say to you, may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.